Angela, thank you very much for coming by today to chat.
Sure.
You're a wonderfully well-regarded writer, director, and producer. I'd like to start at the beginning. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, actually. But my parents moved when I was 1 year old, so I've really never been back. So I feel like some affinity to Chicago, but I don't know really anything about it. And then we moved to Berkeley, where I went to preschool, and then my mom got a job in Los Angeles, and so we moved down to LA, and I grew up out in Palos Verdes, which is about an hour south of LA, and in this kind of, fairly conservative, very lovely place, and that's where I grew up.
What were your parents like as you were growing up?
That's so funny. My mom's white, my dad's black, and they were really actually an odd couple, now that I think about it. My mom is a incredibly intelligent, wonderful lady, and we're really close. She's pretty waspy and fairly, she's not uptight, she's just a kind of serious person. And she grew up in Minnesota, and my dad was this kind of black entrepreneur. And actually, my mom went to the University of Chicago, and then she dropped out of grad school to go down to Mississippi as part of the civil rights movement, and did like the whole freedom writers strike. My mother did.
Okay.
And she
so
actually.
She wasn't that uptight.
She was. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of interesting, like what she does versus her personality.
Yeah.
And she went down and started setting up Head Start programs all across like Mississippi into the backwoods. And
she's kind of an admirable person.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was incredible. And she said at the time, like the government would just gave her just like a chunk of money, but she'd be going to all these little towns sometimes where they'd never seen a white person, or where the schoolhouses were still kind of like Little House on the Prairie, like it was like rows in a church, of each grade basically. And her job was to kind of go and order like 12 tons of crayons and 14 notepads and chalkboards, and she'd just kind of go from town to town in her little white, VW bug. And then she went back to Chicago, and my dad grew up in Chicago, and actually my grandfather was a Pentecostal reverend. So he, and my dad is very kind of rejected the church at an early age, but kind of grew up with a congregation around, and he is a very eccentric personality who he basically left Chicago, and I mean to this day I don't think he's ever worked for another person. Basically his thing was kind of when he used to tell me like never let them put a number on you, basically. Like he was kind of self-employed when everybody wasn't self-employed, and
what kinds of businesses would he do?
All sorts of crazy things. A lot of real estate and inventions and kind of marketing. Oh, and then the big thing, like that was all through my childhood, was he invented a miniaturized briefcase, which was a gift item. But then the patent got stolen by this guy, and I don't know, it was like this whole story. But it was just kind of very eccentric. It was like a bunch of different things, and we'd make a lot of money and then lose a ton of money and make a lot of money and and my mom is very, like, she runs a child abuse and daycare center that's in kind of near downtown LA basically, and she's worked at the same place for the last 25 years, and so our standard of living would go like we'd be really rich and then we'd have no money, and then we'd be rich, and then I called us, when I saw that movie Slums of Beverly Hills, that was kind of, we'd move, like we started in an apartment, then moved to a condo. I think we moved 8 or 9 times in like from when I was in like from elementary to through high school, kind of trying to stay in the same zip code for the school district, because it was the best school district in the
country. Did you understand what the moves were about, or what was going on, or why you were moving so much?
It didn't really bug me, because it was the same, I was at the same school. Do you know what I mean? So it was trying to keep me with my friends and my thing. So it didn't really matter to me. It was just kind of fun each time we got to move, because it'd be some like
something new.
Something new, and it didn't really matter to me growing up, as long as I wasn't like uprooted out of my life, basically.
Now,
But
did you have brothers and sisters?
only child.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And what kind of child were you? What were you like when you were growing up?
I was really, really shy until, gosh, I don't know what age I was. I was so shy, I was like one of those kids that hides behind, my mom's leg or something.
Sure.
Like I was, like it was becoming a problem how shy I was.
Right.
And then my parents put me in a children's theater production, and then I was just like, wow, and then they were like, it's the worst thing we ever did, because then I never shut up. Basically, it was
brought
just
you
like,
out.
yeah. And I read at an early age, I think, so I was always the narrator, because I
Okay.
could memorize all the text.
Now,
and
did you just read a lot
to-
for fun? Was that part of what
Yeah,
you did?
I read all the time. I was
what did
like,
you like to read?
a lot of fantasy,
Okay.
like all the Chronicles of Narnia, I think was probably my favorite.
Okay.
There were like witch books, and yeah, I'd probably say like was detective stuff, but like, kid stuff and that.
Yes. And once you got started into show business in one form or another, did you think that there might be a place for you in this? Was this something that you aspired to get better and better at and maybe work at someday, or was that not part of your thinking?
So I got really into theater from this children's theater
Yes.
thing, and I kind of ended up on a theater track, and this is maybe like 5th or 6th grade,
Okay.
I guess, and there was a really, really strong theater department in middle school and high school in Palos Verdes, and this guy named Jim Bell, who was really amazing. I was a drama teacher in high school. And I remember at an early age loving Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'd like go to the movie theater like pre VHS and DVDs, when you actually had to go to the movie theater, and
Right.
you'd go like over and over and over again and play it. Like, so I saw that like 20 times or something, or like Star
Kids still
Wars,
do that,
or
by the
yeah.
way, but yes, but,
Yeah.
but in those days,
And
they
those things, so
really
you just
did.
had to, like, it was gone, and you were
Yeah.
never going to see it, like, ever again. But I remember, I think it was Raiders of the Lost Ark made the most impression of me, because I
Okay.
was first aware that, like, Steven Spielberg was, like, a director, and that was a job. And I tried to take a film class at this arts camp I went to. I got really into photography for a while and had a
Okay.
little dark room. So basically my parents were really, I kind of hit on this arts thing. I drew some, first I wanted to be an artist, like an illustrator artist. And then I got kind of into film, but it was like really Super 8 stuff. Do you know, like it was kind of early video.
Sure.
My folks gave me, I remember this one Christmas, all I wanted was a video camera. And it was one of the first Betamaxes, do you know what I mean? And I was a kid, and it was this huge camera, and you had to literally carry the like Beta machine on your back.
Yes.
Like you had the
It
whole
was
tape.
manual labor in
Yeah,
those days.
it was
really.
that whole tape where you put the whole tape in, and then there was no down conversion or anything. So, and I remember it being really heavy and trying to like struggle up we were living in this condo, trying to struggle up my street, and like I'd shoot my friends doing we did like a mock, Nothing Comes Between Me and My Calvins ad or something. Yeah. I wish those still existed
be
somewhere.
nice to
I mean,
have
they
those,
were just,
wouldn't it?
yeah, they were hilarious. And so that was my kind of first inklings of wanting to be a filmmaker.
Okay.
But then I decided I wanted to be Steven Spielberg, like somewhere in there.
So you went into high school. Where'd you go to high school? Did you go to
PV High,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you like it there?
I loved it. I loved it.
And were you involved in arts quite a bit? Was that your thing?
Yeah, you had to audition for this class called Drama 1 Honors, which was when you were an 8th grader, and then you got placed in this class in 9th grade.
Right.
So I auditioned, and I made it into this class. But from then on, I was like huge drama geek. But we were so intense. Like looking back on it, there was the curriculum for like Drama 1 Honors, which was you would go to school from like 7:30 in the morning and get out at 3.
Okay.
And then from 3 to 6, we'd rehearse whatever production, the spring musical or the fall play or whatever, from 3 to 6. And then from 6 to 9, we'd rehearse. We'd go to these competitions that would compete, where you'd compete with these different high school groups from around the corner, and we'd rehearse from 6 to 9, and then we'd repeat that every day, and then it was 10 to 6 on Saturday and Sunday. So basically we were at school from like 7 in the
working
morning
hard.
till 9 p.m. and then all day long on the weekends, and that was it was your whole life.
Sure.
And I really attribute that actually to my work ethic now, because it was just what you did. It was just fun. And you put all your friends were in it, and you put all of your energy into it. And we do these like fantastic productions that were really first rate, and the school district had a lot of money to kind of plow into the productions, which is great.
Did you do
But, yeah.
original productions, or a lot of the classics, or
musicals,
musicals, or?
They do. Now, here's the thing, though, that I could not sing. That was one thing. I could not sing. I was a terrible singer. My drama teacher, Mr. Bell, said, you can be my assistant director, basically. So I was his assistant, basically.
Sure.
So I sat, for the first time, I was like, oh, directing, when you'd sat
Right.
next
But you were
to
directing
him.
theater then.
Theater, yeah. Do you know what I
Very
mean?
good.
So I just kind of follow him around and watch what he did on all these productions. So he did like Cabaret, and then Sweeney Todd, and they rented like the whole crazy Sweeney Todd, contraption that was like
Wow.
on Broadway.
This
It was
was
a
a real
thing
deal.
that went to, like, it was, and they had a real tech crew. I mean, it was very intense.
Did you learn a lot about?
I feel like I learned everything in high
to
school.
deal
Like,
with
I've been
that.
to a lot of film classes and stuff since then,
Sure.
but I feel like everything I learned that I use to this day, I
What a
learned in high school.
terrific program.
It was amazing. It was like the greatest program ever. And I was like total diehard. So,
Yes.
but I realized that I actually didn't enjoy acting, but I loved directing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a directing component to the program, because when you were a freshman, the seniors directed you in the competitions. And then by the time you were a senior, you directed the freshmen, and you'd go
Okay.
and you'd compete. So you'd have this kind of group of like 6 freshmen who you had to whip into shape, and there'd be a dramatic and comedy, and then Shakespeare, and then monologue, and there was all these
Okay.
different things, and you'd go. So
And high school ended, and then
Yeah.
what did you do then?
I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island.
Why did you decide to go there?
It's the only school I applied to. Like, I was just dead set on going to Brown, and I read that actually it has no core curriculum, which it does, which really appealed to me at the time, because I just knew I wanted at the time to do theater or to do movies, and I didn't want to learn calculus or like all these other things. I was just
Sure.
like, one, I wanted to go to the East Coast. I had a big fantasy about bricks and ivy and, fireplaces and
Yeah.
East Coast thing, because I grew up in LA. And I think actually kind of secretly, and I didn't really know I was gay or what gay was, in high school. Like, I had maybe like inklings, but they were so muted. But I feel like something was like, in this liberal a place, like in a place where there's no grades and where you can take whatever you want. And the ethos was, if you're smart enough to get into this school, you're smart enough to be in charge of your education and what you want to learn.
Yep.
And it was kind of Montessorian, that idea of, if you are genuinely interested in something, you'll learn about it faster than if it's just teaching by rote and
Yes.
you are, which is really applied to my life.
Well, there's merit to that point of view, don't you think?
I do. I
it
really
often works.
agree that, yeah.
Have you directed much theater? Is that something that you've done?
I directed a ton of theater in college, and then I went to work at Playwrights Horizons and Second Stage as assistants to the producers. And then I ran a off Broadway theater company with another partner in New York. That's what I went to go do.
So ignoring the fact that it's hard to get the message out to more than a small group of people, did you enjoy the theater process? Do you enjoy
Oh,
that
I love
kind
it.
of work?
I love it. I think like theater's the greatest, in some instances, like the greatest medium. Basically, I feel like a great play is better than the greatest movie or television show. But I feel like a mediocre play is worse than terrible movies and television.
Why do you I understand what you're saying, but why
Yeah.
do you come to that conclusion? What leads you to that?
I feel like what I love about theater is that I feel like that I love that it's personal, and that it's this kind of intimate exchange between
Right.
the performer and the audience, and it's unique. Like every performance is different, and it's just the kind of kinetic energy of how the audience is connecting with the performer and what the performer did that day and what they're feeling and what they're pouring into their performance, and that the audience affects the performance in a really interesting way. And so when that is really working and you can like hear a pin drop or it's outrageously funny or there's a give and take that I feel like is the core of what drama's about. Like it's like
Yes.
really joyous. It's like why I love doing what I do. Do you know what I mean? Like when you have these kind of moments that are sublime or they're fleeting
And original.
and original and unique, and you can never like have it again.
Isn't it interesting that theater works at all? Because it is such an artificial
Totally.
setting, yet the emotional resonance can exceed almost any other experience.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I find it, and I can't quite figure out why it quite works that way.
It's totally baffling to me, and I spent a lot of time. Actually, Paula Vogel taught at Brown as this, brilliant playwright, and
Yes.
she did these new plays each year. So I had the opportunity where the undergrad directors would direct. You'd kind of come back early from Christmas break, and while the campus was closed, you had 2 weeks to rehearse these new plays, and then we'd put them up for a week. And it was this like intensive program where you just worked with the playwright, and these plays were just like, beautiful small things, but it was like the most intensive experience where you just get a high off of it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're beholding something, and
Yes.
it feels like
Well, you're truly in
gift.
the moment.
yeah.
In the experience, unlike
Totally.
the movies where you do things over and over again.
Right.
and Even the audience is distanced
Yes.
from
Yes.
the image and from the moment. The moment occurred at some other time. You're seeing
Right,
a
exactly,
version
like
of
a
the
version
moment.
of it that you decided on, and that was, largely. I mean, I think there's aspects of film that are interesting in other ways that could capture other stuff, but for
Well-
me, the theater's the top.
It's a fascinating phenomenon.
Yeah.
So you made your way through Brown.
I made my way through Brown. I directed, all I did was direct tons of plays and it started with kind of more, I guess the first one I did was Little Shop of Horrors musical, which I love. And then I actually came out. I came out my sophomore year in college.
Was that an evolution for you, or did it kind of hit you that this is what was going on?
What was
with
so
you?
crazy? And I guess this sometimes happens to people. I told this story to somebody recently, where as part of the new plays, I was a theater major, and by this time I hated acting. I didn't want to act, but for some class that was a prerequisite, you actually, once you declared a major, did have to take some classes.
Sure.
And one of them, it was similar to the other thing, where I had to audition for all the new plays, basically, and you had to go through as part for your class. So I had a terrible flu. I was really, really sick, and it was during finals. It was part of the final was to audition for all these plays. And I stayed up for like 3 nights turning in some term paper for some other class. I was sleep deprived, sick as a dog, and I went to audition, and there was this one play called Sidewalks, which was actually by a lesbian playwright, kind of about the experience of being a lesbian, but it was a little abstract. You know what I mean? Like the characters were like heart on her sleeve, or I don't remember the other characters, but like woman in coat. Do you know? Like it was
Yes.
one of those plays.
Yep.
And I went in. My friend of mine named Brian Herrera was directing it, and it never occurred to me. But I went and I did this monologue, and the monologue was this character called Heart on Her Sleeve, and it was actually a girl talking to another girl. And I had all my defenses down, and I did this monologue. But for the first time ever in all these years of acting and high school and everything, like I realized I'd never connected to anything that I was saying when I was acting. I mean, I didn't feel comfortable doing it because it always felt artificial and like put on. But this one, I was just really, like, it made sense to me. Like all the emotions in it made sense to me, and all the things. And I'd been in love with, like, you know, numerous friends or things or people who hadn't like returned the affection before. And so, and this, you know, character just was just laying it all out there.
Yeah.
And Brian told me afterwards, he was like, you were the best person, like of all the like real actors who came in to do that monologue. And so he cast me in the play, which was totally baffling to me because
Sure.
I had no intention of getting cast in the play and of acting at all. So I was in the play, but through the course of the play, you know, you were pretending to be a lesbian, basically. So you got to, like, you know, went to like a gay bar for the first time. Do you know what I mean? But you were ostensibly like straight, just doing research or whatever. And so by the end of the play, I was, you know, came out to him, and like 3 other people in the play. Like,
So
yeah.
the experience.
I mean, 3 other
play-
people in the play came out too,
Oh, really?
not just me. Like it was, yeah, but it was
Wow.
college, so you know,
Yeah, there's
a lot of them have gone back in.
Yeah, I understand. There's a certain amount of flexibility
Yeah.
at that age.
Exactly,
where
yeah.
You're trying to figure out what exactly is going on.
Totally, totally.
But you've stayed out,
Right. Yeah.
and it's been the right choice for you. It's been authentic
Yes,
for
yes,
you.
yes.
And did you feel comfortable with it at that point, or were you?
Yeah, then I mean,
challenged?
like that was super fun. I mean,
Good.
actually, it was. When I came out to my mom, she said she was very supportive, but she was like, "I just don't want you to have a hard life," and I was like,
I understand.
"Yeah," but I actually did it. I mean, I understand where she was coming from, but I was like, my life's great. Like, I mean, it's been so much better, and it's
Yes.
not like it was actually like that bad before.
Well, she
It's just
didn't want the pain for you.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we live in a world where there are challenges associated
Right,
with
yeah,
being
yeah.
gay, and it continues.
Right.
But that is often more than offset by the authenticity of
Yeah.
it, the fact you get to be you.
And Brown was like the greatest. Do you know
Was
what I
it?
mean? Like place to be gay. Like you were like considered a little square if you didn't.
If you weren't gay.
I mean, it was just a very liberal school. So I had a blast, and I did like. Then I directed like The Well of Horniness, and we did this experimental play called. I went and did this experimental theater workshop with Richard Schechner in New York, and then I came back and we did this thing called the Pleasure Dome, which was all about like sex and people's. And we converted like the defunct diner into a stage. I mean, it was great. We did just tons of plays. I did in the Boom Boom Room for colored girls. We just did like a bunch of stuff.
A lot of good and
Yeah, yeah.
diverse material, really.
Yeah.
So you ultimately finished up at Brown. You had to leave Brown at some point,
Yes.
despite what a good experience it was.
Sure.
What happened then?
Then I got a internship at Playwrights Horizons in New York. So I moved to New York.
Okay.
And then I got a job at Second Stage, working for the producing director and the artistic director. I met this guy who was like, let's start a theater company, like a queer theater company. And it was called $3 Bill. And we started trying to like raise money and make plays. And actually, that's the first time I did Girl Trash. Girl Trash was the name of a play I did as part of that theater company. And it was the first time I adapted it from other works, but it was the first time I kind of tried writing,
Sure.
which I had never broached before.
And did you enjoy writing? Was that something you felt that you could do?
No, sorry, totally. I actually was I didn't start writing in earnest until after film school. But in the theater, it's very frowned upon for directors to direct works they've written. Like, it's very separate. There's playwrights and there's theater directors.
That's
and
true. I never thought of it, but you're right.
So I just thought of them as very separate
Sure.
jobs. And I was a director, and that's what I was going to do. And the economy is such that you can you can pay like $500 and direct somebody's play. And so I just thought that's how film worked. And it was a really like rude awakening to me when I finally got to LA and realized you'd have to shell out between, you know,
A lot of money.
10 to 60 grand for a script. Do you know,
Right.
like, in that, I didn't have that kind of money. So I only learned to write sheerly as a way to direct, basically, where I, you know, just the economy was such that I had to come up with my own script.
What brought you out to Los Angeles?
I did a play, Girl Trash, which I poured all of my time. I'd go and work my job till 6 and then stay up from 6 to midnight and kind of repeat. And on our opening night was the blizzard of 93 or something. We were just snowed out. Like, we only had the theater rented for 2 weekends, and on the like first weekend, like I'd done all of that work,
yikes.
and there was the hugest blizzard, you know, in 10 years, and 4 people in the audience, and I was like, that was the downside of theater, basically.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, it was a problem. And then I was back, and I had this real thought. I was like painting the floor black at like 3 in the morning one night, like just myself. It was freezing cold, and I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like, I gotta do
is really
something
cold.
else. This is not the way to do what I'm going to do in my life. So I applied to film school, and I went to NYU for 3 years,
Okay.
and then moved out to LA.
Did you come out to LA because you knew the film business was out there, and if you wanted to do something in film, that's what you should do?
Yes.
And at that point, had you decided that it was film rather than theater for you?
I did, yeah. When I applied to film school, I decided to. I remember actually really distinctly. Weirdly, my essay for grad school for the film program at NYU was about how to bring issues of sexuality and gender and race into the mainstream. Where,
Okay.
and I'd had this epiphany for me where every year me and my friends, we'd go and we'd do the gay pride parade, and we'd like go and we'd get drunk and we'd get dressed up and we'd march
Sure.
up and down Fifth Avenue. And on one of the parade days, the night before had been like on Friends, where the 2 lesbian moms were on Friends with Ross and they had a baby.
Yep.
And like, I remember realizing that 30 million people saw that episode of Friends, and maybe like, I don't know how many people saw us like walking up Fifth Avenue, basically, where I was like, that episode of Friends did more in my mind to advance the cause of gay rights than marching up and down Fifth Avenue for 10 years, basically. And then if 30 million people saw that and thought, oh, now these 2 nice
interesting.
lesbians can have a kid,
Yeah.
and Ross can have this religion, that they were people and that it was funny and accessible. So I was like, that's what I want to do. I think that's like a smarter way to do political change, or at least something that I could do, see myself doing. So I went to film school, but I felt in film school that I already knew about kind of storytelling and working with actors, and I just wanted to know how technically you made a movie.
Sure. And you came out to Los Angeles, and what was your first job once you got out there?
You know, I sold my short film. I made a short film called The Kinsey Three, about a trio of bisexual art thieves, actually, a comedy. And I sold it to Lifetime Television, and they gave me like 10 grand or something, and I just lived off that for so long. Like, I was like, I'm going to write a feature script, but I didn't know how to write a feature script, so I basically just locked myself in my house, and I had a roommate, and we just tried to be writing partners and tried to generate a script. My first job, the first thing we got paid, me and my writing partner at the time, this fellow named Ben Tomlin, wrote something for the Sci-Fi Channel, a script for them, and I think that's the first money we made as writers. And then, actually, there was this organization called Power Up, which each year would give $25,000 to 3 filmmakers to make a lesbian short film. And in my own time, I'd been drawing these characters a little comic book for my friends called D.E.B.S, but it was just like a goof for me where I write, I drew the D.E.B.S and I was like, and they fight crime.
Were you a comic book fan at all?
Not especially. Do you know what I mean? Like I liked the ethos, and I liked comic books, but I wasn't I wasn't into them. Yeah, and I worked as an assistant editor at a trailer house. Do you know what I mean? So I knew like those were hardcore geeks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they were really serious about their stuff. So I knew that liking the form wasn't. It was just for me and my friends, and it was just for fun. My friend Andrea Sperling, who was on the board of Power Up, said, you should write a short about that comic, because I'd send it to her and she'd think it was funny.
Right.
So I just wrote a 10-minute short of D.E.B.S, just on a lark, and then they financed it, and I made a short of that, and then that short went to Sundance and eventually did all this stuff. But when we premiered it, the short film, the organization that funded it, Power Up, had this thing called the Power Premiere, and where they showed all the films made that year. And as luck would have it, that was, at one of the tables was the L Word people. It was the entire cast, and they just shot the pilot, and they'd just been picked up. It was called Earthlings at the time, so it was the Earthlings table. And they, Eileen Chaikin saw it at the Power Premiere aired, and they were looking, saw the short of D.E.B.S.
The short of D.E.B.S.
And then a fella named Larry Kanar said he wanted to represent me as a manager, and he was one of the executive producers on the L Word. And then I knew Rose Trochet, who was the director directing the pilot from back in New York. And so there was this kind of synergy. So actually the L Word was the first job. I was a staff writer on the first season, and that was the first film job I ever had.
Were you excited about that?
Oh yeah. No, that was we couldn't believe it when
What a good opportunity.
we heard. I mean, we just never thought. I mean, I guess there was Queer as Folk, but we were like, they'll never make one about lesbians like that.
Right.
Just didn't occur to us. And then.
But yes, they did.
But yes, they did. And then we got the call, and they were like, "Do you want to?" Basically, they were looking for a funny voice in the room. Like everybody, they just wanted somebody to be funny, a funny lesbian. And so they called me, and. I remember watching the pilot
So
on
you were
my
the token
video.
funny
I was the token funny lesbian, yes. And we just couldn't believe, we watched the pilot.
In a world without a sense of humor, you were funny.
Yes, exactly. That was what I was called on to do. It was just it was the greatest job in the world.
Yep.
To this day, it still is the greatest job. And I remember watching it just being they are not, Jennifer Beals does not sign up to we were just what is happening? And then we got in a room and there was these
Well, I think the
all these people.
actresses found it exciting to do something so different.
No, it was great.
And so out there.
Totally.
Really.
It was very exciting and totally
What was it like working
daring.
on the show? What was the what was the process? How did the stories develop? How did you work?
Well, it was interesting. That first year, I was a staff writer, so I was really just watching how everything went. But
as a staff writer, what would you do? What
I just, I sat around. It was interesting the first year because nobody knew what the show was. There was just the pilot that had been previously shot, at a bunch of characters, and the writer's room was very large. There was 10 to 12 writers, just a kind of for a couple lesbians, but mostly straight writers.
Male and female, or all?
Male and female.
Okay.
And it was just this big round conference table, and it seemed very peculiar to me. The whole it was fun. We thought of Gwen Turner thought of the name, the L Word. We were brainstorming names, and then we walked in. I'd known Gwen from back in New York too, but we hadn't seen each other for a long time, and we were joking about whether or not we were connected, basically the chart where you, and we'd kind of, different batches of lesbians would figure out how they knew each other,
Sure.
like how many people they'd slept with in between them. So there were these big dry erase boards, and we started with a chart to try to figure out how many people were between us.
Right.
And then Eileen walked in, and she thought it was hilarious that we'd done this. And then she tried to add herself to the chart, and like different. And then Rose walked in, and she added herself to the chart. And then the chart ultimately became a very integral part of the L Word, the show. So there was these kind of like exciting moments in the Genesis where you're like, oh, it could have gone like a bunch of different ways at that time. And I remember like Pam Grier's character was originally a character called the Captain, C-A-P apostrophe N, who was like a recorder of lesbian lives, like a Stonewall era lesbian. And actually she had the tattoo of how different people connected together on her back. So the kind of chart pre-existed our thing. It was kind of like all these ideas linked together. Yeah. And then we were like, no, that's tired. She should be Bet's sister. Do you know what I mean? But originally she was a gay character, then she became a straight character. There was all this stuff kind of fermenting. And
well, that's how the process of storytelling works.
Exactly.
It evolves.
Yeah, and then but we did the writers' room for about 2 months, and then everybody moved up to Vancouver. But that's when I got the call that they were going to make D.E.B.S into a feature. So I left the L Word at this point, and I went on to make D.E.B.S and Herbie, and then I returned to the L Word as a producer later.
D.E.B.S is a feature.
Yeah.
What studio did that? How was that put together? And
we went to Sundance. Clint Culpepper, who runs Screen Gems at Sony, loved it. And I'd written a feature script to go together with a short, because my idea was that you needed both things. What I wanted to prove with the short of D.E.B.S was that I wanted to make it a no-no movie. Like, we made it for $25,000, and we did green screen and stunts, and I wanted to say, if I can make this on $25,000, then I can make this feature on $2 million and do all the same stuff if you kind of add up the math, which I don't necessarily know if the math works, but that was how it was in my head.
That was the pitch.
Yeah, that was the pitch. And Clint just loved it, and he gave me the script, and he didn't have very many notes, and he said, here, go and make it. And then we were just off to the races. It was like the greatest experience, because we were kind of under the radar. It was such this kind of like small, weird project that I don't even know if like Big Sony had no idea that we were even doing it. And so we were, and they,
well, it's a couple hours overhead for them, basically.
Yeah. It was just so fun. And Clint was amazingly supportive and so smart about the production and the script.
So that was the first feature that you directed?
Yes.
And how did you feel about that? Were you nervous or fearful at all as you went into that?
I wasn't. I was just totally jazzed, because it's almost like you didn't know enough to be scared. You know, kind of like it was just like, just couldn't believe it. But also I'd lived with the characters for a really long time, and I had a lot of...
and you were the only director for this piece, really.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, you just were like, oh my God, they're giving us the money, let's just do it before they come to their senses.
Right.
And
most of the people watching this and listening in our conversation will know about D.E.B.S, but could you explain what you were trying to do and what the objective of D.E.B.S is? What's it trying to say?
It actually emerged out of, in film school, we met a girl who told us that there was a secret test in the SAT, and that she'd been recruited by the CIA, and she was actually on a track to become a spy when she decided to leave and become a filmmaker and come to NYU instead. And so they were ostensibly after her. And I totally believed her. Like, I don't know.
You didn't realize she was certifiable.
Yeah, maybe she was certified. Maybe she was kidding with me. Maybe, but I'm such a gullible person that well,
you wanted to believe.
The idea of that was very attractive to me. So when I kept thinking, like, well, there's a secret test in the SAT, and that's an idea.
It recruits people.
And then it recruits people. And then the rest was just fun. It was kind of my Charlie's Angels. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Lots of cute young girls in short skirts.
exactly. And I thought
Always appealing to people.
what's wrong with that? And for D.E.B.S, I feel like when I was a teenager, kind of looking back, I remember that I was always kind of fascinated looking for lesbian representation, and there just wasn't any. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember looking at in the video box of Desert Hearts, you know, when I was a kid, and like one of the women was kind of looking askance at the other one. Do you know, like it was so coded and undercover that there just wasn't anything out there. Everything was incredibly sad and depressing, and Go Fish was the only movie that kind of tried to say like it could be a good time. But D.E.B.S was my response to a John Hughes movie that I wish had been around when I was a teenager, where I was like, I'd always rewrite things, and I'd want like Molly Ringwald to get together with Ali Sheedy, or like the Charlie's Angels to be in love or something. And so I was just trying to kind of make my own version where that happened. I didn't have to rewrite it in my head for teenagers.
Well, it's a very fun movie. And it has been very well received. People like it.
Yeah.
Now, after you finished that, what did you do next?
We took D.E.B.S, the feature, to Sundance in Berlin, which was really fun. And then I got a call from Disney, and they were interested in me directing Herbie, the Love Bug. They'd sent me the script. Based on D.E.B.S,
was that?
Based on D.E.B.S, yeah.
They'd seen D.E.B.S and they said this gal can do it.
And everybody always thinks that's really weird, but actually the ethos of D.E.B.S was very much what they were looking for Herbie, where they wanted somebody to bring a lot of kind of girl power energy, because it was Lindsay Lohan it was about a girl race car driver was the twist with this Herbie, and they wanted to be kind of like fresh and fun and have a lot of energy. And I was reading scripts, but it really appealed to me. I wanted to do a movie about a girl race car driver. And then I was like, oh, okay, Herbie, well, it's basically a story of a girl race car driver, except she's got a magical car. So I was into it. But I went in and I gave them a big pitch, Disney, for how I saw the movie. And then they said, okay.
Well, by the way, your pitch is still talked about.
Really?
It was so impressive, and most people go into those kinds of meetings with a very conventional sort of view, but you had, by virtue of having done D.E.B.S, you were looking at the material completely differently. Right. I think they probably liked.
Yeah. And I really cared. Like, I think a lot of people were like, okay, we'll do it. But I was like, no, this is a girl in her horse movie. You know, I was talking about like the Black Stallion and things, and I really wanted people to like tear up at the final race. And I did a whole kind of analysis of like why it could be more than a Herbie movie.
Well, you certainly pulled that off because it's not just another movie. It's a really good movie, and you wouldn't think that The Love Bug 2 or Herbie would prompt a really good film, and a film that people really, really like a lot and go to again and again. How was the experience of doing that? Because now you're working at a much larger budget and bigger stars. 30-some Herbies.
Comprised,
totally. Different Herbies making up the car.
Right.
How was that experience for you?
Wow, it was totally overwhelming. I mean, and it was exciting and fantastic and awful and brilliant and wonderful. Like, it was just it's definitely the most pressure I've ever been on in my life, because I'd always just done art for fun and for art's sake. Like, I mean, it'd be really important to me, but it was, like your play could do well or not do well, or your short film or whatever. Even D.E.B.S, like, there wasn't a corporate mechanism that was felt. And Herbie was kind of the inverse in that it was a Disney brand, and like it was a corporate synergy between Disney, NASCAR, and Volkswagen. Players. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it was very important to the studio, and very, like, you just felt like the marketing machine and the whole thing, and it was really,
wow. You're right.
intense. Do you know what I mean? And for the first time, like they didn't even count D.E.B.S as a movie. Like they kept referring to Herbie as my first movie, and I was like, well, I just made a movie. But like to the studios, like your indie feature is just kind of basically like your short in a way. And so, so I had to do a lot. There was an all-male crew of Teamsters. You know, like it was, for the first time, I really felt like a woman walking into, like where you were like, oh wow, they probably never worked for a woman ever. Or
and
a black woman or a young woman. Do you like there was, I think, a lot of.
Now, you had a few things going on there, didn't you?
Yeah, totally. So it was really challenging, but also fantastic because, like making an independent movie or coming from NYU, which is really independently geared, as opposed to like USC or UCLA or something. I was always used to how you cut corners or how you make something less than feel like more than. Mm-hmm. That was like the school of movie making I went to. Do you know what I mean? Like how do you recycle extras through the background and change them, you know? Or how do you see just a little bit of the set and make it seem like more? And all of a sudden it was, no, how do you make more seem like more? Do you know, like it was...
Although many of the techniques are the same. You know, it's just that you're working on a bigger scale. And
you had the best people in the world working. Do you know what I mean? Like the best crew, the best... cinematographer. It was just like huge. The California Speedway, like these were, like it was, you couldn't kind of... I remember like I tried to like move my chair and everybody went like, no, like there was like somebody to move your chair after you. I was just like, it was totally, you really felt like it felt like a general. You feel like a general at war, where the other movies or theater experiences were just kind of like you with the actors having a good time. But this was like, there was tons of CG and special effects, and this crew, I remember being like, you'd go to a location and you decide what you do, and then I'd start walking to where the next shot would be, and 200 people would get up and they'd start walking, and I was like, why are they following me like everywhere I go? Exactly, I had a Verizon network. That's totally what it felt like, with me everywhere. And so I had to get really used to. And the question is like, then how do you be an artist and be creative and be fresh with all these eyes on you and all the pressure, like you kind of feel it. So that was the exercise of like, how do you kind of follow your vision under these conditions?
I would think that would be really, really hard for someone doing it for the first time, really.
There was a lot of firsts where ultimately, like, it was really fun, but you were just like, you just kind of have to go into a zone and trust yourself, but you
just kind of go with it.
Yeah. You
worked with a really good cast in that picture.
Amazing.
Lindsay Lohan.
Yes.
How was that? How was she?
She's that's so funny. Everybody always asks me about Lindsay, but Lindsay is probably one of the finest actors I've ever worked with. Like, I think she might have a photographic memory. Mm-hmm. The crazy thing about her is that she just does it perfect. Like, and Herbie, admittedly, was probably an easy movie for her to go because she'd been such in kind of like the Disney stable of actors.
She knows how to do the Disney.
So she knew how to do it, and she'd just show up, and she'd look at her sides like this, you know, like what, and then put them away. And then she'd just go and she'd do it and be perfect. And then you'd tell her something, and then she'd do 2 takes, and then she'd be done. And you couldn't.
Wow, what a pleasure.
Like, it's a bizarrely, really hard acting challenge to act with a car. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody thinks, oh, it's a kid movie, and so it's really simple. But to, like, Herbie was just like all Lindsay's reaction to this inanimate object. The whole movie depended on her, whether or not you believed that she believed that this car was real, because it was all about her relationship to it.
The car has relatively limited movement. It's not like the car's has facial expressions or something. It's blinking its
Right.
eyes.
Yeah. No. I mean, it was
whatever.
really, and that was a
Or
choice.
spraying oil or something.
Right. Totally. To kind of, and I made a choice to not make Herbie CG or to do, like, people think Herbie talks, but he doesn't talk. Like, I wanted to be very true to kind of
Sure.
the repertoire of the original Love Bug, because that's who Herbie is to me. And she brought it to life. And it was so crazy. Like, there's this moment where we went back and we did reshoots, and I'd taken all these lines out of the script because I was like, there's no way that you can get away with it. Just people just laugh for the wrong reason, basically. And then we added in all this stuff of her talking to the car that we did on reshoots on green screen. And something like the moment was like, where she was at the final moment of the big race, and Herbie's hurt, and they're at a pit stop, and it's down for the count, and she has this little monologue where she says, "I'd rather lose this race than lose you, Herbie." And like, those lines had been in the script originally, and I was like, there is no way an actor can say, "I'd rather lose this race than lose you, Herbie," and like not just have people running for the doors. But I
Sure.
put it back, and then I remember like Elle magazine or something was on the set when we were shooting that day, and they were like asking me about Lindsay, and I was like, watch this, just watch her do this. And she was just sitting in the car, green screen, nothing around her, and then she said, I called action, and she said, Herbie, I'd rather lose this race than lose you. And I teared up, and I was like, that really takes an actor to be able to
Yeah.
pull, you could take a lot of people and they could say that and you wouldn't care or believe them, but
It
she
is
could
so
do it.
hard to say those somewhat maudlin or ridiculous
Yes, yeah.
lines in a way that carries it off. That is such a talent
Yeah, definitely.
to be able to do that.
And she has such an earnestness and just charm to her
Yep, she sure does.
to her performance that that was very cool. And then there was this like massive circling nonsense of the rest of her life at the time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
which I felt like we were the eye of the hurricane or something. Like, for where I was, it was just the work. And then you'd like step out of it and it'd just be like deafening the sound of
Right.
like I couldn't even, even being in like a peripheral approximation to how crazy it all was. Like, all the people throwing, fame and money and things and stuff. But it was just like like the chatter and the thing that you'd watch, and the paparazzi popping up, and
Yeah.
it was total insanity. So,
Well-
but for our little bubble, that's what that was.
Certainly, celebrity like that has its great advantages, but it comes with its challenges. And
Yeah, definitely.
it must be really tricky to do the work, to be functional in the work, while everybody is analyzing everything you're doing, and
Yeah.
you see your picture all over the place and everything.
Totally.
Mixing those two worlds can't be all that easy
Mm-hmm.
for a young woman like that, really.
No, anybody.
Yeah.
I dare anybody to go in the same space.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Obviously, it comes with its own benefits, financial and otherwise.
Right,
but
right,
boy,
yeah.
There's some challenges to it.
Totally.
You worked with Michael Keaton. How was that?
He's brilliant. He's one of the most
he's
brilliant
a really
actors.
good actor, isn't
Yeah. He wanted to know that I would direct him. Do you know what I mean? That I was kind of like strong enough to tell him exactly what I wanted.
Sure.
And then, and the way he liked to work was that he wanted to ask all his questions at the beginning, where you say yes, no, this, that, da 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 da. This is how who the character is, and then very little on the day. And he did something that like no actor I've ever worked with does, which is he would roll takes where you call action, and then he does the whole take, and then you say reset, you don't cut, then everybody, all the extras, everybody goes back to the thing, and then he does it again without you stopping, everybody stopping to give him a direction or to do these things. He just likes to roll like 5 or 6 takes, basically.
I
And
see.
it was so interesting because he would do the performance, and then on the next, reset, he would do it again, and he'd clock his performance. It was like light green, dark green, darkest green, black. You know what I mean? Like it was this it was so specific, and like he'd basically deliver his scene.
He could do it in gradients?
He could do it in gradients, and it was pretty much like everything you would have asked him to do if you'd stopped and said, try it this way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like he'd thought so down the road that he'd figured out all the interpretations or ways you could have gone with this scene, and then he gave them to you all, and then he'd be like, do you want anything else? And you'd usually be like, no, because now I've got
You
like
had the
6.
menu of choices.
You've got a menu of choices.
What's interesting to me about him is that he's known traditionally as a comic actor. That's his background. But he is a wonderful, quiet actor.
Yeah.
And he's really very effective when not saying anything at all, when just giving a look or just moving.
Yeah.
And that not everybody can do.
Definitely.
And he does it. He does it in your film a few times where it's just a glance or a movement or a shake of the shoulders. And,
right.
And he communicates what he needs to communicate.
Yeah, totally. And I often think like people underestimate the acting it takes to do a kids movie in a way, but that to make the hardest task of doing Herbie was that the actors had to communicate the reality of what they were doing. Like if they didn't believe it, or if they were pulling their punches, or like, this is, whatever. If they didn't commit.
If they phoned it in.
If they phoned it in, then it would just destroy the fantasy of the whole thing.
You're absolutely right. It's very tricky to do, first of all, comedy in general is not easy.
Yeah.
What's the old saying? Death is easy, comedy is hard.
Yeah.
But to take lines that for a lesser actor would sound ridiculous and artificial, and to deliver them in a way that is real in a family movie, not easy to do, not easy to pull off.
Yeah, totally.
Now, how did you feel after Herbie was actually well received by an audience and became kind of a big success? What was the effect for you?
Physically and kind of emotionally exhausted from the experience, that I thought you're always supposed to go and get your next movie and get your next movie and get your next movie, like kind of before one comes out, you're supposed to get the next movie. But I hadn't been home in, the whole process took probably a year and a half from start to finish to make Herbie.
Yeah.
And it was just grueling hours and things. And so I really wanted to take a break and just kind of regroup with my life after making it. And actually, Eileen Chaikin called me up, and Herbie had just come out, and she said, do you want to come direct an episode of The L Word again? And it was during season 3. And that really appealed to me at that time, because there were so many moving parts with Herbie and CG, and that there was just so much stuff that the idea of 2 actors in a room doing a scene seemed kind of like back to my theater days in a way. Like it seemed like a cleansing balm in a way, like a drink of fresh water kind of with that.
A very nice change.
Yeah, and
you had been with
doing a kids movie, and then which was like super fun and very powerful and exciting. But then you also wanted to, like, it was rated G film, and then and D.E.B.S was kind of interesting because I actually have kind of I don't know if you call it like an edgy mainstream sensibility. Do you know what I mean? Like the content's kind of edgy, and then the packaging, I always called it kind of like a Trojan horse. Like I always wanted to, like D.E.B.S seemed like a Trojan horse to me, where you make it so kind of shiny and happy and fun that people forget because they're laughing or having such a good time that you're really trying to say something with the movie, or trying to kind of insert your politics or a message inside the movie. And so I went up to Vancouver and just directed like an 8-day episode of The L Word. But it was a really fun and intense experience working on that. And the show had totally grown and become a hit in my absence. And so I was kind of coming to it, but I was like a huge fan of the show. And so after doing that, then Eileen asked me if I wanted to come on as a co-EP for the 4th season. And then I stayed with the show 4th, 5th, and 6th seasons.
Now, the episode you directed is really a wonderful episode, and it moves so fast because you're moving from character to character and phone to phone.
Right.
And you use some split screen and all sorts of fun things.
Yeah.
And there's a real skill to that. And that was something that you had done a little bit of in D.E.B.S.
Right,
you really went at it, I mean, fast and furious.
Personally, I get the greatest sense of satisfaction directing my own work, you know, because you kind of imagine it when you're writing it, and then it's this great payoff to get to direct it and see it through to editing, because it's like a complete process. And so Eileen was so great because she would said, basically, you can do whatever you want. Like, I wrote the episode, and she was very supportive, different from a lot of show creators and showrunners, where usually when you go on a TV show, there's a very set, you know, template for what you have to follow.
Yes.
Basically, of like what the shots are, what the style is, what the acting style is, like everything is set. And Eileen, I think, is unique in that she was really excited about kind of hiring independent filmmakers to come and kind of do their thing with her show. Do you know, like, so...
Yeah, there's a lot of differences in style from episode to episode.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that wasn't the greatest thing, because I feel like a lot of times when you watch The L Word, it's uneven. Do you know what I mean? But then...
I know exactly what you mean.
But from a director's point of view, it was great because, you know, you got to kind of go and play in this pond. And so, but that was an example where she was like, kind of do your thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you were to take, and there's a big episode in the middle of every season, and it was kind of their big.
Right.
And I started writing it, and I wrote a 20-minute phone tree. And I was like, nobody's ever going to let me do a 20-minute phone tree. I was just going to see like how long it could go, and could you incorporate
call after call after call,
like all the split screens.
Connected,
You know, where there was all these different plot scenarios going on, and I was like, can you get everybody? It was just kind of like a patter song to me, where you just kind of go through. And I wrote it, and I turned in the script to Eileen. Sure, she was just being like, that was really funny, now really write the thing. And she was like, I think we should go for it. We should just
try it.
By that time, the show was a hit, so Showtime really let Eileen do whatever she wanted, and then she was like, just go to town.
Right.
And she went, and I did the whole, like, that episode, I call it like a kitchen sink episode, because I was like, I want to do a phone tree and split screens, and then I experimented with kind of moving through foreground action, like in a sequence, and then I did this whole musical Luck Be a Lady sequence, which was my like Fosse sequence, where I was going to try to like cut it like a Bob Fosse movie. And it was like great fun, because you actually weirdly never get a chance to, when you're doing a movie, you can't experiment. You just have to deliver, because it's only happening once, and there's so much pressure that it's always just, that's the only time. Like, maybe if you are a great filmmaker who's made tons of movies, you can like play around, or Woody Allen could be like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that for a while. But do you know what I mean? For us working Joe directors, that you can't be like, you know what, I'm going to just try this, you know, everything in one take. You know, kind of like, I did one episode, the oil wrestling episode, where I was like, I'm going to experiment like a moving camera, like Altman style,
Right.
you know, where, and you kind of got to do that on the L Word, which was so fun.
Well, that's an unusual opportunity, and you really took advantage of it in that episode,
Right,
because
yeah.
it is a fun thing to watch. You just try to keep track of who's talking
Right,
to who, and,
yeah.
and they keep interrupting one another, and you
Right.
know, and call waiting and all this other stuff that goes on. I lack the technological savvy that those girls have
Right.
to be able to move from call to call, but it's very impressive to watch. And so after that, you worked as a co-executive producer on the show.
Yeah.
And what was that function?
Everything. I mean, that's
Okay.
why I really love.
Do you write?
You write, you produce, you direct. I mean, like on a given day, you'd be writing a script, you'd go in the editing room, or I'd be directing an episode, and then you go into the editing room at lunch and you edit, work with the editor for 2 episodes you did, you know, earlier, and then you'd go back onto set, and then you'd go home at night and you'd write the episode after the next one. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so it's like a total production experience where you're really in charge of just shaping where a show goes. And it seems like, for me, I love television. Like, movies are amazing, and they're like this really intense one-off. Do you know what I mean? Like, every time you cross a scene off, like, that's it. You're not going back to that scene. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so it almost feels like you're like scorched earth. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're doing whatever you can to get that scene, and then you get it, and then you got it, and that's what it's going to be for the end of time. And then you're done, and everybody goes their separate ways, and you on to the next movie, which is this whole different experience. And a television show is like an organism. Like, people live there in the organism, and it's full of possibility because you don't actually know what's going to happen. You have an idea what's going to happen, but like a movie, it's all done. Like, you're just trying to kind of get to the end and deliver on the experience of what is known. And a television show could go all different ways. It's like trying to keep, you know, hold of a cat. You know, and it'll crawl and squirm and move all around, and you're just trying to like hold on to the cat and like carry it from here to there.
Do you think it's different at all for a show about, you know, feminine sexuality versus heterosexual behavior? Do you think there's a different energy or a different...
Definitely. It's really intense. It's kind of interesting. Like, a lot of actresses would come onto the set and they'd say, they'd have 2 reactions. Either they'd say this is totally freeing because they, in their lives, could never or had never been in a situation where there were not a significant kind of male energy at play. Do you know what I mean? Like, all of by the end, all of the crew was largely male, but everybody in any decision-making and producerial capacity was a woman. You know what I mean? For better or for worse. And that the actresses felt, I think, totally freed up to, like, someday I was talking to somebody who's kind of a bigwig television person, and they said that they'd never seen the actors who were on the L Word. They were like, that's such a tremendous opportunity for them because they were able to play scenes and parts that they would never be allowed to. Do you know what I mean? Like, and explore emotions and situations that are never offered to actresses besides Meryl Streep or somebody. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like, you can count them on one hand of, you know, actresses who are allowed to kind of play the range of emotions that they're capable of. And then everybody else is largely usually the cipher for the male characters in all of movies and all of television.
Yes. That's very true.
And so the highs were really high and the lows were really low, and that nothing is simple, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, everything. But everybody had such a commitment to the show and to, with, sometimes differing agendas, but there was so much passion. Do you mean like nobody didn't care?
Well, it gives the actors an opportunity to take a lot of chances. And they'll hit some good ones, and they'll strike out occasionally.
Sure, totally.
But it sure gives them a lot of opportunities to do things they wouldn't otherwise be doing.
Totally.
And I think your comparison to film is a good one because in any episode you see a dozen different instances of really poignant thought and a chance to really act, which you may only see once or twice in a film.
Right.
So it's just a little different, and I think intensity is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Recently, you've worked on Hung.
Yeah.
How has that experience been for you?
That's been really fun. I mean, I was like, my resume looks so weird. I've got like this poppy teen, lesbian, comedy, big Disney, like kids movie, the L Word, and now Hung. And that came about in kind of an oddball way in that I am very good friends with Colette Burson and Dmitry Lipkin, who are the creators of Hung. And I'd just come off, we'd finished shooting the L Word, and they were just going into production. And asked me if I'd come on because I knew them so well and that they were going into the first season of their show and just wanted somebody to be their like consigliere and guide who they really trusted to kind of be there for them. And so I came on, and it was really, it's really fun and crazy. I'd never actually been on the production of a first season of a series.
Sure.
And what's so crazy about that is that Alexander Payne had shot the pilot, which was really amazing. But then the show had to develop a life of its own. And nobody knew what that was really. Like before, like when it's the first season, it's just all possible, but nobody has a reference. Like you could refer to the pilot, but things are gonna like grow off of that. So, like if the L Word was a cat, this was like a dog. Like you were kind of trying to, you have to basically download what's been in your head for years, percolating like a soup, and then you have to explain to somebody how to cook it. But you don't know, like you've been adding stuff to the soup for years. You're like, and one day you stick in a head of cabbage, and then another day some bouillon, and then you're like, how did I make the soup? You have to kind of like taste it and this and explain, and you're like, onion, it's onion, and somebody's like, no, that was actually celery. So you've had to. So I feel like it was arduous. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't easy, but it was very satisfying and fulfilling because the actors are incredibly brilliant.
They really are.
And the writing was very rigorous. Like every script was probably like rewritten from scratch like 3 times, and that you were just really like, which story, what's what's the tone? And the tone is very hard to pin down. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of feeling your way in the dark. And Colette and Dimitri get it. Do you know what I mean? But they've been married for however long. They're a couple. Do you know what I mean? So they understand the world and had been with the pilot for a year, and before that written the pilot. Do you know what I mean? Like, so basically they'd had, a few years with these characters plus their relationship of the two of them together. And then they have to download that to us who are just kind of coming in. And so it was trying to find the right, and it's quirky. Do you know what I mean? It's not like ha ha ha, or you can't be like, oh, it's like that show. Like it's not. It's its own thing. So. And
it really is well done. Whether it succeeds ultimately in terms of attracting an audience.
Yeah, and it's doing great. I mean, it's fun to like it's a bona fide hit. So that's exciting.
Well, it's nice to be associated with that.
Yeah.
What interests you going forward? Are there certain things that you're working on now or thinking about or would like to be involved in particular?
I've been thinking about that a lot lately because I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I have a graphic novel that I wrote that's coming out later this year, which is really interesting. And I was writing a comic book for DC Comics, this character called the Web. It's coming out in September. I did a web series, an independent movie. I worked in cable television and studio movies and independent movies. So I feel like I've been kind of sampling everything, because I don't think you should just do one thing. Or I'm interested in a lot of things. So I kind of follow my nose and see what this experience brings me. And I think I'd like to direct another movie, maybe an independent movie. I don't know. I'm interested in retrying that experience with the sum of all my knowledge now. It'd be interesting, because when I made D.E.B.S and Herbie, it was just fresh out of the gate. And so, bizarrely, when you direct television, you actually get more experience as a director than feature directors. Because it's funny that feature directors actually, mostly have very little time behind the camera, whereas television cameras, just sheer numbers of hours doing it. So I'd be interested in doing that, and I'm very interested in having my own TV show. I think that would be exciting, because I love the process of doing everything at once, and I love the speed. And I feel like, I've been really lucky to work with Showtime and HBO, and that you can really, on those channels especially, explore really complicated stuff that's really daring and can be funny and have pathos. So I feel like I'm kind of moving into a new phase. I don't know what that's going to be. I feel like I kind of started, what interested me was really popcorn pow. Like, I really wanted to kind of make an impact, and girl power zone, and to kind of get those voices and get those images out there. And then I went over here, and the L Word was, to me, it felt like, I once told somebody, I was like, if you'd had a chance to be at Stonewall and you knew it was going to happen, would you go to be there? I felt like that for the L Word. I feel like it was this moment in history, and it was never going to happen again the same way or before. Somebody called me up, and they were like, if you want to participate in this adventure that will literally go down in history, because it's changed, I think, radically the representation of lesbians historically and throughout the world. That was a really exciting chapter. And now I feel like I'm kind of moving into a new phase, and I don't know what it is, but I think it kind of involves writing and directing together, and that there's more themes. Me and my partner just had a baby, so that's exciting. That's a whole new adventure.
A boy or a girl?
A boy, little boy. And
now the trouble begins.
Yeah, exactly.
But little boys love their moms. Sure.
He's just he's like animatronic. He's just like this amazing little munchkin. So I feel like, I've been thinking about it a lot, I'm not sure what's on the horizon, but I'm kind of excited to go there. I think it'll be like a combo of all the things, but I feel like I'm kind of artistically moving into a new place, but I don't know exactly what it is.
Well, to a certain extent, we don't control the world, and something will come that you'll be interested in and kind of try to make your own to a certain extent. We don't all do exactly what we want to do all the time, but sometimes that's for the best.
And I think it's good. I say kind of yes to a lot of opportunities. So I'm actually going to go direct a pilot for a new Teen Nick show, which is actually kind of back to, D.E.B.S, Herbie Land, and then go back to Hung.
I think you'll find you'll bounce around a lot. Different, have fun with different things. What would you say to someone who wants to do some of the things you've done, who wants to try to work in the areas you have worked? Is there any sort of thoughts you would give them as to what has kind of worked for you and what you've observed and learned?
I tell people Because like I shouldn't exist in a way. Like I'm like a biracial lesbian director in Hollywood and writer. And it's just, and people are always like, that's really weird. But I actually think it's because I'm all those things that I work a lot, because I think it's really important to kind of own who you are.
Yes.
And to be very confident in your vision and voice, and that people are interested in that. I tell people, like I used to when I first got out here, I'd like dress up really nice to go into meetings and things and meet people, and I thought that's what I was supposed to do, like an interview, to go interview at, you know, Merrill Lynch or something. And then it occurred to me, I don't think anybody told me this, I think it just figured out that they don't want them. Like they want you. Like the reason they're hiring you is because you have a point of view and you're an artist, and that not necessarily that you're an eccentric personality, but you're who you are. Right. Do you know what I mean? And they want to match who you are with what project they have, because they want you to have the answers, you know. And then if you care passionately, like I spent a lot of time thinking about this, you know, the land which I, you know, make art in, and that, for better or for worse, that's kind of like who I am. And I always talk about, when I first started, there'd be this kind of gap when I'd walk into a room, because people just didn't know what to make of me. They didn't know if I was black or white, or if I was a boy or a girl. They were just kind of like puzzled about like who I was as a person. And I always took advantage of that gap, because I just started talking into the gap. And then once you start talking and expressing your point of view and what you want to do, then people, they forget about everything. They forget about who you are, what you, like I actually think the confusion is good, because then people have to kind of, I don't fit in their box, and so then they just have to kind of take what I say or what I'm talking about at face value. I think they kind of listen more than they would, and have less kind of preconceived judgments of like who I am, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, just, you know, at face value.
Well, all you can be is the very best version of you.
Right.
And, you know, I tell my son and daughter that. Don't try to be me. Don't try to be someone else.
Yeah.
Learn from them, you know, emulate where you think it is appropriate, but ultimately be you, because you can be the very best version of you. And I think what you've learned and observed is there's no one quite like you, and you can't be a lot of other people, but you can be a really good you.
Right. Totally.
And that's enough.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you for taking this time.
Sure. Of course. Thank you for having me.